Do you ever forget how to spell the word scarlet? Or is that just me? And we are live here to talk about all the TV that we watched for the last 2 weeks. But, like, let's be honest, mostly Miss Scarlet and the Duke. Like, what else mattered in the last 2 weeks? A few things, a few things. Actually, we've got a lot of
Yeah.
news too. We've got some stuff we've read. I actually got a lot of shows on my list. I'm maybe exaggerating, but melodrama is at the heart of Miss Scarlet and the Duke, and I cannot wait to get into it. Kate, how have you been over these last 2 melodramatic weeks as Miss Scarlet and the Duke and a lot of TV has returned? And what news do we have? Obligatory 20-minute
I
wait
have been
time for
pretty good
Kate's
this week. Did
audio to
enjoy
catch
what
up.
I got to watch. And we do have we do have a couple things in the news. So first and foremost, Vox Machina comes out tomorrow. I know it's slated for June 20th, but or January 20th, not June 20th, January 20th. But how the Amazon Prime schedule works, that actually means for Pacific Standard Time, that's going to be 7 tomorrow. So I'm super excited about that. Then there's a couple of new movies coming out that have caught my eye that I wanted to bring up. So I don't know if anybody's read it, but Judy Blume's novel, Dear God, or God, Are You There? It's Me, Margaret. Or Are
Mm-hmm.
You Listening, God? One of those. It was a book that I read as a kid, and I don't remember how well it stands up, but I remember it very much affecting me as a kid. I really enjoyed it. And so I saw that they're making an adaptation with it, and that's going to be coming out in April. And so I'm super excited about that. Hopefully, it's really good. And also in April, there's a movie coming out called Polite Society, which basically follows a girl who decides she wants to be a martial artist slash like a stunt person. And so she's in training for that. At the same time that her sister is about to get married, she's very suspicious of the in-law family, and basically it seems kind of like a slapstick comedy action movie of her saving her sister from this very controlling family. It looks really great.
That sounds fantastic. And honestly, we could use some good movies right around now. I feel like we were about to enter a bit of a movie desert following all of the, holiday movie releases. We had Glass Onion, we had some straight to Netflix specials, and so on. So looking forward to the next run of movies. We are also about to, just enter a season, pun intended, of seasons coming back out. I know we've got Flash starting the next couple weeks, and we've been seeing teasers of, the various characters that we actually care about showing up on a show that we don't care about, which is great. We also have some Only Murders in the Building casting teasers, various big names going to be on it. So excited. Not that there's any bigger name than Selena Gomez, but just some really good stuff coming up. And also some really good stuff airing now. And by that, I mean Miss Scarlet and the Duke. Now, listen, I'm insufferable on a good day. I was particularly insufferable when watching this week's episode of Miss Scarlet and the Duke because Kate, it hit the nerve of getting you so excited about a character development and ship and more than I don't want to say more than just a ship as if a ship is something small. Like if the only thing you care about is a ship, like fantastic, come sit by me because I'm the same. But also character development, mystery, and so on. It had all that moving forward, but it also had this delicious pining and just enough like toxic angst. And then we have just the bare hint, the murmuring of the greatest evil of them all, the biggest bad of them all, the infamous potential love triangle. We hate that, but do we hate it here? What are your thoughts on this week's episode of Miss Scarlet and the Duke?
Well, so like the first two episodes this season have been great, and I think I when I watched it, I kind of mentioned to Cammie there. they've done a really great job, and they know what they're doing. They've done such a great job of slowly taking, and I do mean slowly, taking this dynamic, this relationship between these two people, and slowly adding like nuance and texture and understanding and care between the two, which
Texture, that's such a good word.
it wasn't absent in the first season, but it's definitely improved. There's slowly we've gotten a more like they fight and they argue and it's still combative. But there's a better reasoning. They both understand where they're coming from, and yet they still have to have the fight because that's who they are. But it's less of a personal one versus one. I am frustrated with you because taking up the space that I want to take, and rather it's more an argument because he is such a high influential person in the police force, and she is a person that occasionally bends the law to be a private investigator. It's all more to do with the situation they find themselves in than themselves as people, and that slight shift that there's more empathy when they do argue, there's more understanding, there's better communication, even though they are still squabbling like 5-year-olds all the time. It's a really great slight dynamic shift that's really leaning more towards, okay, we're finally going to get it. And of course, we're not going to get it until the last episode of the season, if we even get it this season at all. We might have to wait till season 4, which, is a high likelihood. But then you add in the other element of the possible love triangle, and you add in this person who, while we support Eliza, and so that way we don't like this person at all. We don't love Arabella. There is an aspect of Arabella that I think me and Kimmy would both, without the context of the show, ship her with William. We both would have enjoyed that type of dynamic, that she is a self-made, or she is a woman who has taken her circumstances and she is making a name for herself within this restaurant she owns. And she does have past of being kind of a mean person, but she's trying to move past that. uh, it is a character that we would typically really root for in this situation. And that's always so much more interesting with a love triangle. It's never my favorite trope anyway. It's always messy because it's normally done poorly. But this actually does give me faith that they're going to do this and do this well, where it's not going to be this completely hateable one-dimensional character that we're going to dislike, and we're just going to be like, why are they still here? We're not going to like her because she's done so much wrong in Eliza's past, and this is still just told through Eliza's story. But there's a level of texture and complexity to this character that makes William's attraction for her totally and apparent. And it's an interesting perspective for us to have on this character that we would typically really enjoy. And now having to go, but I don't want that. I want the messy one. I want the one that doesn't make any sense. I want the one that's chaotic. I want the toxic one, the one that we've been yelling for 3 years at our screen to just kiss already. Like, that's the one we want,
I love the
even though it's
character
not the one
development
that
of Kate
on
having to
paper
root
makes.
for a toxic relationship now. Having, you're
Yes.
presented now and
Yeah.
be like, this kind of makes sense, but I want the toxic one. I just love that. Let me tell you, well, first of all, I couldn't agree with you more. And yet, when you told me this the first time, I was livid. I was like, how dare you suggest, I mean, I didn't say that, but I felt it on the inside. How dare you suggest I would root for the other side? And then I put on my big girl panties and sat with my feelings, and I was like, oh wait, no, you're right. I'm so mad that you're so right. Like, I literally on any other circumstances would love this character, just right on the gray side of justice, had a little bit of like a difficult, abrasive, childhood where maybe she was a little hard to get along with, but it was because she was insecure, because she, this, that, the other, right? She had some kind of advantages that made the other girl jealous, whatever. Other girls in general jealous. So yes, I don't want to root for Annabella and the Duke, but I do want to root for Annabella. And here's what's interesting about Annabella that maybe was apparent from the start of the episode, but didn't really stand out to me until literally the end, that final scene where she comes in, with the cakes and the cookies and so on, is how well they captured this feeling of somebody making Eliza feel small and invisible. With Annabella, they really go out of this way. You know, you can tell by looking at her, she was probably your classic, beautiful, doll like child, right? As a child. And now, as a woman, she takes up so much space in the room. It's not because she's a large woman, she's a very like average sized person. I think Eliza just probably happens to be short, and we don't really like process that until we see her alongside like other women necessarily. So she's probably, you know, whatever. Maybe she's like slightly on the taller side. She's just like just a tiny bit on a physical sense larger than Eliza, but she takes up so much more space in her energy than Eliza does. She has hand motions above the level of her shoulder. She has the big hats and she has the ruffles, and she, you know, has a way of moving that commands presence. And when we see that in contrast to Eliza, who is so kind of no nonsense, matter of fact, she is, you know, she's not poor. We're not meant to conceptualize Eliza as poor necessarily, but she is not in big over the top super feminine fashion. So there's just this huge size difference across women that otherwise maybe have like a tiny bit of a size difference that really forces you there at the end when you're finally zooming in and seeing Eliza feel tiny and small in this corner of the office compared to the space that Annabella takes up. I love that contrast at the end. And in hindsight, that develops over the
Mhm.
course of the whole episode. We see them almost as equals at the beginning, or they don't really know what they are when Annabella comes up to the table and she's sitting when Eliza's dining. But over the course of the episode, Annabella just gets larger and larger. She has the larger office, she has the larger staff, she has an easier time kind of conversing and being present with men. She has the
Mhm.
bigger basket of baked goods. I love seeing Eliza feel small because it's hard, it's hurtful, blah blah blah. Stab me in the heart. Like, okay, I've been down an angsty road before, and I'll do it again. But we don't often get to see Eliza be small. She is always the person in control. And in fact, this season we see her take a mentorship role and have assistants and, you know, younger, less experienced women working for her and so on. So having her be in a position of vulnerability, I think, is setting up for some excellent toxic ship dynamics. Love it. 100 out of 10. So excited. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Hi, Carey.
Yeah, well, and I mean, and you talked about the small versus large, and it's another example of this show being really good at subtle like costuming choices. They've always dressed Eliza in almost always blue, and it's, I mean, there's the concept of it because it's a more masculine color. That she is traipsing into more masculine roles, and she also dressed very much in like Victorian style menswear for women.
Yes.
And it's always been because she's trying to force herself into a man's position. And that's always what gets the you're a female detective, lady detective. But when you look at, say, Arabella, she is also taking up what would be normally considered a men's role. So she is a business owner that she owns this restaurant. There are people that do react to her in the that's so strange. But
Mm-hmm.
because she, instead of leaning into the I'm going to mask myself in this masculinity, she is probably the most feminine dress character they've ever had on the show. She
Mm-hmm.
has all the bright pinks and blue and like all the pastel colors, and she has the massive bustle. I mean, her bustle like behind her dress 3 4 times the size of Eliza's, and it's just a like quiet
That's
inference to the thing
Victorian
you're
for saying
talking
she is a
about, that
fat ass. Sorry, continue. I don't know what came over
fat.
me. Please continue.
Exactly. But I mean, you're not wrong.
I
It
know.
was kind of it is kind of a Victorian coded way of saying like she is the it girl, and
Right.
we're trying to like mask Eliza in these scenes by her being plain or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And even like that last scene that you're talking about, it almost felt like theater to the point of how exaggerated it was,
Yes.
but the framing the framing was so good because you could just, I mean, the heartbreak in her eyes as she takes her little homemade, like sad little Victorian cake and just goes, okay, and picks it up and moves it as if she doesn't even want anybody to notice it's there, as all
Hmm.
these fancy French style sweets are brought in. And it's just so, that
Can I
framing, I mean,
give
it was
them way
over
too much
dramatic, it
credit?
was melodramatic, but it was
Can
so
I
good.
Can I read too far into it and give them like way too
Go
much credit?
ahead.
Okay, so Eliza's cake was a Victorian sponge. Okay, great. Like classic, like very whatever. But what she actually presented to him was a very specific styling of Victorian sponge where you can see like some sort of like icing and treatment and fruit, but it is technically what would be referred to as a naked cake in that it is not fully frosted. There's like a little bit of icing across the top, but you can
You
see
can
through.
see the layers.
You can see the layers, you can see through, it's naked, it's vulnerable, it's transparent. Whereas all of the cakes that were brought in from Annabella's bakery are like fully frosted, fully covered, fully closed off, and I still believe Annabella to be fairly closed off as well. This could be me reading way too far into it, as I am wont to do. However, I also think I'm right. Hello again, Carey.
Just like welcome to the dark side. Like
Yeah,
welcome to the dark side of reading way too much into the most benign details ever. That's like my thing.
Well, I mean, it's like anything. Nothing appears on screen by accident or happenstance, right? There's a reason for everything, so why not?
absolutely. And they had just touched on this super angsty moment of doubt. It's what when I first watched it, I was like, "Oh, this is so sweet. This is this like perfect tentative flirting." And then once the scene plays out, you start to see it as dark, and I'm going to explain this for Carrie's benefit what happens. So basically what had happened was Eliza goes, okay, so there's like a whole case and a story and a mystery, and they have to track down a murderer, blah, blah, blah. And nobody gives a shit about any of that. We're here for Eliza and the Duke. So forget case of the week. We're at the wrap up at the end. Okay, so baking is relevant to this entire endeavor. Eliza can't cook, never tried to cook, doesn't have to cook, has a cook, she's a detective, doesn't matter, right? But she kind of gets a little bit insecure, kind of for the first time in really 3 seasons, about her femininity. She was raised with like the appropriate level of like ladies training and all that kind of stuff, but she's just not a particularly feminine person. She encounters for the first time in years a girl from the boarding school she grew up in who is extremely feminine. Eliza is going through some insecurity. I do not think this insecurity we wrapped in this episode. She wants to learn how to bake a cake, and essentially her mother figure um, teaches her to make a cake, like her like friend who also functions as sort of like a housekeeper type of vibe. So she makes a cake. She brings it in as a much deserved thank you to somebody, the Duke, who had assisted with the cake. And this is one of the first times we've ever seen Eliza be like vulnerable or bring something to it. This is like they almost always subvert gender norms. He is almost like he will cook for. They've shown him cook for her. They've shown him take her to, et cetera, et cetera. This is like the first time they've ever had some sort of like traditional gendered structure wherein she brings a cake type of vibe. Okay. So she brings this in. They're kind of like, they've got this like toxic banter thing where it's just like a tiny bit more hurtful than like your typical teasing type of thing. So he says something like, "Oh, maybe they'll make a homemaker out of you yet," or something like that. And she's like, "Oh, please, I don't think that, absolutely not." And he's like, "Well, surely at some point, you're going to want to tend to a home or raise something like that." And she's like, "Oh, I know you're teasing and I won't entertain it." Like she doesn't say yes or no. She just says, "I know you're teasing, I won't entertain it." And it's like this very like subtle angst. And what she's saying, he's teasing. You can like see on his face, he's not, duh, like we knew that. But in hindsight, I find that entire interaction extremely ominous because up until this point, they've had this whole like dine every Wednesday at the last of the month thing to where like by Victorian standards, they're like borderline almost dating, but refusing to call it that. But you can tell like he wants it to be that. And I think this is the moment, despite it being sweet and flirty, I think this is the moment where he really is starting to lean into his doubts of like, I don't think she likes me or is into this at all. Like in his head, he's been building all these interactions, like these Wednesday dinners and blah, 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 up to be something. And it's like this moment where like, I think he is realizing he might be friend zoned. And we as the audience know he's not. And I think most people around them would probably not know that, but they've set up these doubts. They've set up for the past couple episodes him making comments about like she'll forget that they have their dinners, or she'll cancel on their dinners, or she'll forget this, or just basically her not being like soft, attentive, or affectionate in any way. And I think all those doubts have built up to this moment, and now he's like, this is not romantic to her at all. Thoughts, concerns?
The question would be then,
Just agreement.
what will he do in response? Will he say, you know what, I've wasted my time here, I need to move on, which creates more angst, right? So is that what we expect?
He's gonna move on with the super feminine Ruffles girl, who we don't like. I want to dislike her, but I don't dislike her.
We don't like her. It's so it's maddening that I can't not like her, but she actually is quite likable, even when she says like the most cutting things with the nicest smile. I'm like, you know what you just said. You know you're being mean, but that was really cool. Like, I don't hate it.
Like, I kind of see myself in her. Let's call it what it is. Like, there's a little bit of like... Like, if you've ever been, like, moderately socially abrasive with a smile, and maybe you are a little more on the feminine side, even if you're kind of, like, masculine abrasive, like, she's kind of that. Like, I'm more like her than I am like Eliza. It is what it is, which is, like, not a compliment towards her. But she is, like, a really interesting character type that we don't see a ton of, and, like, I like her, but Eliza and the Duke all the way. And also because that's the angstier, harder route, and I love pain and suffering.
Yeah. And where it's all kind of heading is I'm sure we're going to get at least a pretty predominant secondary plot line of like him starting to court this girl.
100%.
This woman. And like him being really into it and her being super into it, and then her like connecting the dots that like they still hang out on the regular, like, and they still have the teasing banter, him and Eliza, and like her start to get jealous of the friendship, and then be like, all right, you either stop being friends with her or we're done. And he's like, I can't do that. And then we're finally going to get at least another minute step in the love plot line where this is going.
I love this song.
It's never been an unpredictable show. It's a very predictable show. It's a very predictable
and I love the predictability of
it. I'm so excited about it.
Fun, at least.
If it's not broken, don't fix it.
I was going to say, you can be predictable if you are fun and entertaining, right?
Exactly. And like, okay, here's the thing, and this is also me giving them too, this is maybe me giving them the appropriate amount of credit. I don't know. And I swear we're going to get off this to talk about M3gan and like The Last of Us and like other like not fluffy things. Okay, so this is my last point probably. There is some, I hate a love triangle, blah, blah, blah. There is something nice about seeing him like Annabella, and I'll tell you why. Yes, she is like kind of hyper feminine in a way that Eliza isn't necessarily. However, she is abrasive. She is cutthroat. She is blunt and matter of fact. She exists in the moral gray area. So to see him like a woman who has those factors is reassuring in the fact that he would like Eliza, who also has those factors. Eliza is also abrasive, blunt, whatever. So there's something reassuring about seeing like, okay, physically totally different type, but like, okay, Eliza's a small blonde woman. What guy in a Victorian era doesn't like a small blonde woman? Like, whatever, right? But the fact that he likes her, like, potentially quote unquote less likable characteristics Fantastic, extremely reassuring. And Eliza is not the kind of girl who needs to go for a guy who's like, I hate all the other girls, but you're not like the other girls. Like, I think she needs that reassurance of like, the Duke actually likes difficult women. Because let me tell you, if you're a difficult woman, finding out that your partner, just like in general, likes difficult women is like super reassuring. Anyways, that's all. Give the 20-second catch up for Kate's audio.
Now, I was going to say something, but I'm not getting in
It
trouble.
shows that 20 seconds.
Pots stirred. Okay.
Now I want to hear it.
Here's the deal. All I was going to say is, if you want to characterize yourself as someone who is difficult, then darn sure you better find someone who appreciates that, because if they do not, they find easy really, really fast.
Oh, yes.
And so, yeah.
100%.
Not saying that I have, but I'm familiar.
Yep. On that note, this week we have also...
Can I ask one question, though?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So,
are you kidding? We could talk about this all day.
Yeah. So you guys have probably said this at least more than once, but I don't recall. So I don't want to say hang up, but why is there a particular hurdle that Eliza has that doesn't allow her to say, you know what, this is or would be good for me? Why can't I just make that leap or jump or whatever? What's holding her back, I guess, is the question.
So the way they have shown it is that she is hyper focused on getting this career, this detective business off the ground. And they show it as like she is smiling, she's engaged, she's interested. This isn't like blood, sweat, and tears, nose to the grindstone, woe is me. This is like, oh my goodness, like a new clue. This is so exciting. Like, she looks like excited, but there is a darkness to it in that she has no parent, she has no husband, she has no other way of making money. So she actually does have to get this business off the ground. It's great that she loves it and they show that she loves it, but we as an audience also understand if you don't do this, you are SOL. Because she's so hyper fixated, hopefully with a positive mindset, she simply does not entertain like this whole like courtship thing. Like, she is not off trying to find a husband. She doesn't feel she has time for it. And she's not mad about that because she's excited about her career. What we as the audience also know, though, is there is a little more to it than that. Her father died and she kind of has abandonment issues because of that. So she doesn't seem to put a whole lot of stake in having a male partner because she assumes they will leave. Not because she's had a male caller who has left, but because she has had her father leave. So daddy issues, I guess.
Well, and addendum to that, the only man that she's ever kind of had any flirtation with is William. The only other men that she regularly has scenes with are more of a strictly business type relationship, whereas William, they kind of walk the line. And there is a part of season 2 where it's a little more like straightforward that they are truly flirting with each other, that they're unofficially courting each other before he breaks it off. And he's the one that breaks it off because she's made it abundantly clear that she will not stop doing what she's doing. That she, for as much as she needs her livelihood, she also, it's like what she feels called to do, and she will not give it up just to get married. And at the time, he has a big problem with that, mainly because of his own career, not because he thinks it's morally opposed to a woman having a job, but more it's because it's so problematic for his own career. We're going forward, it seems like it's becoming less and less of a problem for his career, and that's what to finally be able to allow that. But right now, she has abandonment issues. She will not let other people's lives dictate her own. She does have to provide for herself because she refuses to let other people provide for her, i.e. get married to somebody that would kind of restrict her in such a way. And the only man that's ever been any fathomable consideration had to also kind of cut it off with her and go, this is not sustainable for either of us at the moment. And he does kind of leave it with this like at the moment ... kind of ending, and we kind of continually see him look at her as like, I would love to, but you refuse to stop.
Mhm.
And we'll see if that ever becomes resolved. Like, we don't know where this is going.
And so finally, then, if this show or when this show ends and they are not a couple, will that be considered sort of failure is not the right word, but it feels like from everything that I've heard, that's obviously what you guys want. But what I'm saying is,
Yes.
if they don't wind up as a couple, if they are just sort of like colleagues, friends, special friends, or close friends, or whatever, but not a couple, will that be okay?
No. I rebuke it.
No, I, my gut instinct is to want to rebuke it, but actually, to be honest, I think I would be fine with it. It is more of the Cammie hellspin that we would enter into that I don't want to see. Uh, it I think it would actually be an interesting take for them to be basically, it's understood that they are a romantic couple. They just can't get married because of the situation they find themselves in, and it's like a Victorian friends with benefits
They have no
lovers.
benefits.
When
There's no
we're
benefits. That's the thing.
okay, like, I'm trying to think of the best like analogy. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm They're both old and living together, and they take care of each other, but it's like a Commonwealth marriage, Victorian. I don't know.
To your
Stop
point,
yelling
Kate.
at
Now, and
me.
now to your point, Kate. Now let us move on after this. But one of the greatest love stories, I guess, of what 80s and 90s television, Wonder Years, right? Spoiler alert: Kevin and Winnie did not end up together, right? But that's what everyone wanted. But that's not what happened. Still fine, still okay. Just didn't happen. So you can have a good show and not wind up there.
If it happens,
I
whoever makes that
agree.
decision needs to drop a pin and fight me. IRL.
I agree. I totally agree. I just also, looking at the show, looking how it's written, and looking how it's framed like it's a crime drama. There's barely any like crime. The crime of the week is like tertiary plot at best most of the time. Um, I don't really see them not doing that, and if they don't, I don't think I'll be mad. I won't speak for Cammie, but I just the how this is writing, how this is going forward. We may not get them married or like happily ever after, but we will get the closing credits inference that that's where it's headed.
The next time we talk about this, we should expand on this question and talk about the balance between a government appointed like person of the law versus a privately hired person of the law, because that's also an interesting balance that they have to strike here between somebody who is like a civil public servant and
Mm-hmm.
somebody who can be hired by the rich, because that is actually more often explored in this show than the actual crimes they're solving, the different places that they come from, and the fact that one of them is bought by a
Mm-hmm.
person and the other one has to deal with like politics and governmental, like corruption and like rich people in charge of the government rather than we the people in charge of the government. So that's our next little tangent we'll get into. For now we only have 19 minutes and I want to hear about M3gan and I want to hear about The Last of Us. So Carey, you were a good sport about Miss Scarlet and the Duke. I'm about to pull you up and let you talk about M3gan. Kate, did you watch it? 20-second delay for Kate to answer. Carey, go ahead.
I'm just laughing at like the title you've given it, because I think I think it was Jamie Lee Curtis had like, no, somebody had the joke of like, what do you call it if they make a third one? It's already got a 3 in the title, right? What do you do? Um, but no, I saw it obviously when it came out, and it's sort of everything that I expected to get in a January horror movie that sort of like went viral because of like that dance scene in the hallway, right? It's a combination of Chucky meets iRobot meets Small Wonder, which was fun. And it didn't disappoint because some of these things like Snakes on a Plane, it's like, hey, it's like a one hit, it's like a one note sort of situation. You go in and it's like, now I've got to sit through 2 hours of this, and it's just, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Um, but this delivered more than just the freakiness of having a childlike robot that could basically rip your head off. Um, Strangely enough, and I guess it's sort of like which character you sort of identify with, but the scariest thing to me was not watching this little doll like run through the woods on all fours, tracking down this bully of a kid who probably got what he deserved. But sort of the scary thing to me is, as a parent, is seeing like the look on the mom's face when not when she realized that like her sister and brother-in-law were dead, but basically when boom, she's got this kid now who she is responsible for and has no sort of idea how to be a parent. And it's like there's no manual. There wasn't anyone she could call upon for like help or assistance. It's like this is here, this is what you have to deal with. And for like that moment just sort of sat with me as like a parent. Like I remember that fear, right? But as a parent, you sort of, prepare for it. You've got like months and months to expect it. It doesn't just hit you one day. It's like, bam, now I have this. So to strangely enough, that was like a scary moment for me. The movies billed as a horror, and certainly there are some like, I mean, anytime you got like a childlike doll like doing menacing things, it's scary. But it didn't play it. It played more of a sort of a moral and ethical sort of situation and some comedy and action to me more than it was just horror. But it was a whole lot of fun. Um, I guess the only regret that I have is like the girl who actually plays Megan was doing like all of the. I wish that, I mean, obviously they really couldn't do it, but I just wish that they could have seen use her face because she was sort of like the star of the show in a lot of ways, but she's like stuffed behind that mask. They could not have made that movie without her. So it's nice to at least see that she's getting a little bit of shine after the fact. So all I do know is if they do make a sequel, they need to hurry up because that little girl won't be a little girl very long, right?
Yep. And I think like the hype of something that goes viral doesn't always like last for very long. So capitalizing on it now makes sense. I've seen so much hype for this show. I've seen so many TikToks, where the all the memey nature, the dance, referring to it as M3 again, like like all that kind of stuff.
Mm.
Hilarious. Love it all.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. So you have not seen it?
I have not seen it. No.
Oh man, you've got to
I've
go to the
heard
theaters
all
and check that
about
out.
it. I've
Yeah.
seen spoilers. I've heard reviews. I've seen all the memes and the silly little whatever, but I have not actually seen the movie yet. Very excited to.
Oh yeah, it's a good one.
Yep.
You- Before I go on, what are the things that sort of is sort of strange in a way is because this isn't, I mean, she obviously created this childlike robot as a toy.
Mhm.
And the question I had while watching the movie and the question that I had even after was, what kind of rules and regulations do we have like here in the real world that sort of regulates what people create, how they create it, and for what purpose, right? What's stopping someone from being in a warehouse right now creating some sort of artificial intelligence that could do all sorts of harm? I mean, I know theoretically, I mean, we have law enforcement, we have rules, we have regulations, but what's stopping Joe Schmo from his garage from deciding to create a robot that could like has the power and strength to do all these dangerous things? And I don't know the answer to it.
That sounds like a Kate question. Kate, answer that for us.
I have strong feelings about the fear factor of AI anyway. If you've been on Twitter at all, there's actually this massive argument right now about AI art, which is a tangential conversation. But there's a bit of a misunderstanding of how it works, which it's a lot to get into, and I'm not even the best to talk about it. But it does raise, I think those raise better questions about irresponsibility, and the general kind of concept of, in science, a lot of times there's this question of what can we do, or like pushing the boundaries of what's possible, and not asking, is it ethical? Should we be doing this? The the AI art is an example of this. Is a technology that has been further processed, like pressed behind, that is doing smarter and smarter things. But ethically, is it sound? And there's a whole conversation about how it's not. So the AI art conversation is basically taking, like, just for harvesting, for lack of a better term, harvesting all these images on the internet without permission from the original creator, and using those as information building blocks to create new pieces of art. But you can actually see the artifacts of the previous art within the new, and that is, in a way, basically copy pasting from Wikipedia, putting it in your high school report. Like, that is, it's just an exonified part of that. And because of that, that's how all AI works. I mean, it's taking different information from one thing and putting it in another thing. And the concept of doing that is really questionable. Like, there's a moral question there that it's hard to talk about. And especially when we talk about it in a broader sense, there's very few people that fully understand how, they're also open to having the moral conversation. There's a lot of people that know how it works, just want to push the boundaries of it, and people that want to have a conversation about it and put boundaries on it don't always understand what works or possibilities that it could be capable of. And that's where it's always kind of drawn the line.
And I think sort of what we're sort of all understand is that, like, to your point, we don't know, or there really isn't anyone who can sort of best speak to what we should be and what we should not be doing. Because again, it's like, hey, I can do it, so I'm going to do it. And that's incredibly dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And this isn't, I don't know if this is a spoiler, if it doesn't matter or what, but it's what would absolutely blow my mind is somehow if this movie somehow gets retconned to be like a prequel for like Terminator, because you just sort of felt that's like, if there was at the end of this movie and there was like a teaser of a Terminator in it, I would have been like, that feels about right.
It makes sense, and it's kind of exploring then that idea of this slippery slope of, if you allow this destruction, what's the next greater version? And I think the tie to, like, using AI, there was the Madison Square Garden situation, using AI to ban everybody who worked for this one law firm, and using facial recognition to kick people out, something like that. Well, the argument, this is a slippery slope. What else will they use AI to ban people from, a particular business for, and so on. And I think movies are such a fun place to explore that slippery slope and sort of take it to the next extreme as a means of A, entertaining us, but B, forcing us to think about, well, what could happen if we decide this is okay? It's a good question. All right, well, speaking of things I haven't seen yet, I have also not seen The Last of Us, although I promise to start it as soon as possible. Kate, I know you've seen it. Carey, have you seen it?
I have not, but I've heard really, really good things.
I have as well. I think there's one, maybe 2 episodes out. I'm not sure. Kate, tell us what your thoughts are so far.
I have watched episode 1. I don't know if there's 2 out yet. For context, I haven't actually played the game. What got me interested in it is my very well-known love for Critical Role and their very strong connection to the game. So I was interested in this story, but I'm not a gamer, so I never want to play the games. So this is my way of knowing the story. And then it is a zombie movie, and I never been a zombie person. It's not my thing. I did, yes, watch Pride and Prejudice and Zombies because I am a true fan. But, other than that, I don't really have much interest in that kind of genre. But I will say, coming at it from just like a very generic understanding of that kind of story, I think it's a really interesting take on it. So instead of it being like brain eating flesh or bacteria, whatever, it's the fungus that kind of works as a fungus does and takes over the host bodies. And I think that's a really interesting take on it just from a scientific perspective. They did use the guy that's always the evil scientist to explain this concept at the very beginning, which I think is hilarious. It's the guy from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. that makes the robot. I can't remember the guy's name, but it's the same guy. I think that's a really interesting way of going about it. And then from a storytelling perspective, the first 30 minutes are heart-chatting. They're heartbreaking. It is a backstory of the male lead. And it is brutal to watch. And apparently it is almost shot for shot, exactly like the game. There's definitely scenes that you can watch, and if you know it's a video game, you can see how tried to frame it as if it were a video game. Like there's a point in the car, and you feel like you're driving the car. There's a lot also of just kind of laying the groundwork of all these different characters and their personal relationships in the first episode, and it's really well done. I think there's a lot of questions that you still are left having, which are clearly going to be answered. But they do a really great job of establishing who these people are and their role in this greater story without you having to know it already, which I think is a task that a lot of adaptations, especially like this, fail to do. And I think this one does a really great job with it. And I'm interested to see where it goes. The Bella Ramsey, who I've talked about before, liking her in Birdie Called Catherine. I can't remember that name, but she was really great in that. She was great in Game of Thrones. She's great in this, and that it's just. I'm really excited to see how that goes and to kind of see how this story progresses. And it's clearly going to be found family. It's going to be a couple other things and tropes that I'm interested in. Not necessarily romance, but I think it's going to be a really great show as it progresses, and I'm interested to see what happens.
You mentioned there were some moments that were shot for shot in line with video game footage, as you understand it. Is this a type of show where you actually hope they follow the video game storyline exactly, or is this something where you want variations, a storyline change, character growth change?
I mean, because I don't know the source material well, I don't personally have any investment to it. I guess I kind of in all adaptations, both in the ones I have seen the original and ones I haven't, I'm always on the side of do the best you can of honoring the spirit of the original, whether that be the portrayal of characters or anything like that. But if you feel like there's a reason to update something, whether just for clarity's sake, for improving something because you think a character's not fleshed out enough, a storyline itself is not fleshed out enough, there's a plot hole that was missing, any reason like that, I'm all for it. I think from like the few articles I've read about the show that people are saying it's pretty true to the original source, and that there is confirmed to be some edits being made, but it is kind of in the line of like clarification of the motives of the different factions of these people that are going to be kind of versing each other, and as well as some greater exploration of characters that were not in the main storyline, because if I understand it correctly, it really only followed the main two characters and you never got to see characters that behind the curtain, as it were. And I think in the show they're trying to show you behind the curtain a little bit more of the other characters, but that's just my understanding of what one article was saying. Other than that, I don't really have any investment on which, if they keep it true to life or true to the, because I have not seen it, haven't played it, I don't know what it is.
Well, I look forward to watching. Carey, go ahead.
Mhm.
So here's my question. I need to know about the functionality of these zombies, right? Because we see the zombies on The Walking Dead, and they're just like a bunch of a mass horde of nothingness, right? It's moving slow. And then you go to Shaun of the Dead, and it's a comedy, and you've got zombies who can run and that sort of thing, and can do a lot of different things. And you said that this apparently is a result of some sort of fungus. So is there a duality to any degree to these zombies, or I just want to get an idea of what they're like?
Um, the visuals are disgusting. We'll just say that. So it is like a fungus, and the little bit I have read through, there's a working theory that they're adding to the story or adding context to it, and it's actually a breakout caused from flour. So fungus was in all the flour store, like started growing in this flour. Once you consume the flour, you basically have the problem. There's a lot in the original episode that supports this theory. Basically, there's every opportunity that they mention they could have, like cake, pancakes, biscuits, anything like that. There's so many mentions of food that they were going to eat, they just never got to eat. All of it, including Flower and all these other characters that we do see end up as zombies and the initial breakout, all were shown eating Flower that day. It's all kind of a concept of the fungus itself, much like fungus in nature, grows and controls the host organism
Mm.
in the zombie form. Now that the fungus has mutated enough to survive in the human temperature, which was always the kind of inhibiting line, now that they can survive in that heat, it's growing in the human, and it is able to control the person. And based on where you get bitten, affects the time it takes to fully infect you. And then you take somebody, say a person who is elderly and physically ill, they're infected, and now they're crawling around like there's some horror movie reference I'm trying to make. I don't watch horror movies. I don't know what it is. But crawling around on all fours like a dog, like super fast, galloping toward you. Uh, because of
Like
this
Kim Brigan.
fungus, it's very visually creepy. Yeah, the fungus will like grow out of the mouth when they're kind of like feasting. It's gross.
Okay, maybe I'm not watching it. I don't do well with skin things.
Yeah, because the only reason I ask is because it's
I don't normally either.
for me, if I'm going to be watching zombies, it's important to know what kind of threat they pose, and if the threat is if it has to be 1,000 of them for it to be a threat, as opposed to like one or two that can like sneak around and get you when you're least expecting it, then those are the things I look those are the things I look for also. Interesting.
Yeah, these are not Plants vs. Zombies level zombies. These are very much a threat on their own, as and only worse when they're in a group.
I mean, if you've ever done the highest level of Plants vs. Zombies, that can be very much a threat as well. Okay, so I'm going to bring everything full circle, and I'm going to try to go super fast because I already know we're at 9 o'clock to tell you about the show that I watched this week, and it was Ginny and Georgia. And here's how we're bringing it full circle. Recall our discussion previously about Difficult Women. So specifically our discussion about how the Duke, it was really interesting to see like, okay, like he likes difficult women and abrasive, whatever. Anyways, so we've all acknowledged with Scarlet and the Duke is just like a tiny bit toxic. So let's multiply that times 15. That I found really interesting was the point of the latest season of Ginny and Georgia. Ginny and Georgia are a mother-daughter duo. The daughter's like 16, 17, so she's like dating in high school, like Riverdale era. The mom is like I guess there's a 15-year age difference because she had her when she was 15. So she's, like in her 30s or whatever. And she's hot, she's toxic, she's killed a bunch of people. She's like your quintessential like anti-hero / villain. Love her. She's fantastic. Such a good character. She's like going to be the mayor's wife. She's wormed her way into politics. It's immaculate. But what we're seeing in the latest season is they make a point in showing both for guys who are into the daughter, so like high school guys, and the guys who are into the mom, which is like literally everybody that's ever looked at her. She's ridiculously hot and like extremely like murderous and broken and has tons of baggage and has been abused and misused, you know, like just the whole thing, right? They've made a point in showing that the guys who are into them are consistently bad, not because the women are necessarily attracted to bad guys, they kind of are, but because the kind of guys who are attracted to like these sort of damaged, abrasive, slightly morally gray area, willing to break the law, but also are like have this history of like maybe being hurt or abandoned or whatever, those kind of guys are specifically looking for like a woman who's like a challenge to control, and they're kind of thrilled by this challenge to control, and they kind of want to control her, and she's kind of a trophy to be like won and earned. So these women essentially have no chance. Any guy they could possibly be with who's into them is going to be into them for the wrong reasons, because they're like, that's kind of like the theme of it. Anyway, that's me bringing it full circle, because like that's obviously like awful and heartbreaking, and like now they're gonna have to kill a bunch of guys. Oh, boo-hoo, whatever, right? But if you take that and you just kind of like take just like a tiny little like quarter teaspoon of that level of toxicity and you sprinkle it into a Victorian drama, and it's like you won't die. It's just like a little bit of poison making it toxic. That's Miss Scarlet and the Duke, and I love that for us. There you go, full circle. And we are almost
And
over
Miss
time.
Scarlet and the Duke,
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, Miss Scarlet and the Duke, she only poisons other guys. She doesn't poison him
Yet.
yet.
We'll get there. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. She just fed him cake. We haven't seen the after effects of it. That is all the time that we have for today. I cannot wait to chat again. I think our next one will be February 1st. We'll be able to talk about Vox Machina because there'll be a few episodes out. There will be the return of reality shows, Married at First Sight, The Bachelor, etc., to talk about. If you don't take the entire time on Vox Machina, that will be the penalty that you will have to pay. And there'll also be more on The Last of Us. We won't be quite in Flash season yet, but we might have a few other shows like The Good Doctor and Abbott to talk about. We'll have a full slate coming up here in the next few. So I'm very excited about that. Have a wonderful week. And Carey and Kate's information is in the description down below if you want to fight with them about any of the shows that they watch. Bye!